Welcome back, investors, to Ticker Time News. I'm Adam. Thank you for joining me for the After Hour Show. Boy, oh boy, was that a nice bounce back in the market today. Look at that S&P 500 here on the chart in front of you. That green candle all the way to the right is today. A nice bounce from early lows this morning to end right at the 200-day moving average. It has stopped right there. On Monday, will there be any momentum to move the market, the S&P 500 in general here, or in specifically, above that 200-day moving average? That's a very critical question to ask as we move into next week. And Monday is the last trading day of January before we start February 1st on Tuesday. All right. Thank you for being here. And remember, the most important thing about this show and the whole reason why we're here is to answer your questions. So if you have a question, leave the ticker symbol and your question in the comments. We will go over it live during the show. All right. I've got a deep dive on Apple's earnings from yesterday evening and a deep dive on Caterpillar's earnings. It shows us some interesting things happening. And also Apple's earnings. That also gives us a few clues on some upcoming earnings that I'll get into when we talk about it. Also, the state of Arizona is putting a law forward to allow Bitcoin to be legal tender in the state of Arizona. That's pretty big news for Bitcoin. Now, the law itself doesn't say anything about other cryptocurrencies, just Bitcoin. And then it does mention the technology of blockchain, but no other cryptocurrencies are mentioned. So that is very interesting and pretty big news. Can you imagine the state of Arizona going for it and then a domino effect throughout the rest of the country with other states then adopting Bitcoin as legal tender? It's a pretty big deal. All right. So while we get into all of this, do remember the most important thing, seriously, is your questions. So if you do, don't feel bashful or afraid. Just go ahead and put it in the comments and we'll go over it. All right. Stocks did cut early losses today to close much higher as investors continue to digest earnings reports from many different companies and many different sectors. And of course, the Fed shift to a more hawkish policy. The Dow Jones ended the session at 565 points higher after losing more than 300 points earlier in the session. In the S&P 500, it gained 2.4%. Look at it on the chart here. This is an incredible bounce. And the NASDAQ, it did even better. It rose 3.1%. So good job, Diamond Handers, for that nice bounce and by the dip today. Will this hold, though, now that we've reached that 200-day moving average is the big question. Apple shares today, they were up almost 7% after the company reported revenues and profits beating forecasts. And of course, it's said to expect supply chain constraints to ease maybe during the March quarter. More on Apple in a moment. Also, Visa jumped 10.6%. Yes, Visa jumping double digits after it beat analyst forecasts for profits and sales. Now, on the week, the Dow was up 1.3%. The S&P 500 gained 0.8%, while the NASDAQ ended the week flat. All right, let's talk about one quick little plug, and then we'll get into Bitcoin. Now, I have to mention our top 10 stocks guide. It's there to help investors down a path towards quality stocks in this wild market. So click the first link in the description or the link in the live chat and become a member to get instant access to our top 10 value, growth, dividend, and momentum stocks list. These stocks are constantly updated, so you always have the best names available. We've done the research, so you don't have to. All right, Bitcoin. Let's pull it up here on the chart. TradingView BTC USD, and there is a link in the description for a free account to TradingView. Ethereum did good today as well. Bitcoin up 1.83%. It is moving up towards that middle yellow box here that we have on the chart. As far as relative strength goes, it's sitting at a 33.4 right now, so it is gaining momentum. Let me put volume back on the chart here, and you can see the last 2 days have been really good momentum buying Bitcoin and good pressure pushing up on the stock. I'm sorry, on the crypto. That's really good because the previous 2 days have relatively been flat, equilibrium right there, pretty much flat. Now, before that, of course, it had sunk and it had sunk to new lows. So, could the lows that we saw on the 23rd and 22nd of January, could that have been the bottom for Bitcoin? We had the death cross, right? That's the purple circle you see there, and it's a lagging indicator, meaning that we've already been in a decline. Now, it could mean that we've already seen the bottom, or the bottom is right in front of us, and then a rally is incoming. That's what I see a death cross as. And then, of course, we get the golden cross, which is the complete opposite of that, and that means we've reached the top. Okay, so Bitcoin has got good momentum. Let's look at this story. It is right here. Senator Wendy Rogers introduced a bill to make Bitcoin a lawful currency in the U.S. state of Arizona. Now, it's a bill that introduced to make Bitcoin a legal tender for Arizona. Just a couple of sentences here. So, Senator Wendy Rogers has introduced a bill proposing to make Bitcoin a legal tender in the U.S. state of Arizona. The bill seeks to add Bitcoin to the list of instruments considered legal tender in Arizona and make the peer-to-peer digital currency a lawful medium of exchange in Arizona, enabling citizens to pay debts, public charges, taxes, and dues with Bitcoin. If enacted, all financial transactions that are currently done in US dollars could most likely be done in Bitcoin in the state, including payments and payouts. Citizens could opt to receive their salaries directly in Bitcoin, and companies would have complete freedom as to how and when they could use Bitcoin. This is very exciting for Bitcoin and for the United States. Now, we know that other countries around the world have enacted Bitcoin as a currency, especially El Salvador, and there's other countries that are considering it. Now that the U.S., the United States, the state of Arizona could take Bitcoin as legal tender is pretty eye-opening and pretty wild for the cryptocurrency. It's also interesting that this is Arizona where this is happening, because Miami in Florida and New York City in New York, those two cities have been battling it out for cryptocurrency dominance. So it's interesting that this is happening, that this bill has been put forth in the state of Arizona. I find this very exciting and a huge deal if passed. If this can get out of committee and get to a floor vote, I would be very interested to see who's voting for this to actually happen. Very interesting and exciting. All right, so there's the quick little news bit there for Bitcoin and this bill to introduce it as legal tender in the state of Arizona. All right, maybe that's given Bitcoin a little more momentum to rise because of that news. It's always a potential. Okay, Ethereum, ETH/USD on TradingView. And I always use Coinbase as the source. And Ethereum up 4.6%. So during this entire move here, Ethereum has been moving in bigger percentages. So Ethereum might be up 4.7% like today, while Bitcoin is up over 1%. Or it could be in the reverse of that, where Bitcoin may be down 1%, but Ethereum is down 3%. So Ethereum has been moving at quicker percentage basis points than Bitcoin has here recently. So looking at Ethereum, it is sitting right on a price line support here, right at about 24.25. And for the past week, the candles have been resting right on that price point, 24.25. So that's very interesting. Will this potentially stables the value of Bitcoin? I don't know necessarily if Arizona putting forth this bill, and if this bill does get approved, if that would stabilize Bitcoin. I think Bitcoin still has a long ways to go before the volatility kind of levels out a little bit, and it acts more like a secure, a mature, like the stock market does. The stock market is very mature in how it's functioned over the decades and centuries. So I think it's going to take more than just Arizona allowing Bitcoin to be legal tender before Bitcoin does start to level out with that volatility. I think we still have years to go, maybe a decade, before that volatility comes out, because we still have, I don't know the exact how many years, but it's over a decade before we reach the full count of 21 million Bitcoins on the market. And that's where the max, the ceiling is, and there will never be another Bitcoin mined. I don't remember exactly how many years it is, but it's a long ways out before that occurs. So to answer your question, no, I don't think that Arizona allowing Bitcoin to be a legal tender, if that does become law, I don't think that will even out the volatility. I think it'll still move in big and wild swings throughout the years to come. But of course, as more and more countries and more states in the US, as they, I guess, I guess it has to do with laws, as they start to accept Bitcoin as legal tender, then eventually maybe we'll get to an equilibrium. But I think it's still, again, it's years and years down the road. This is just the very beginning. You know, the whole S curve of how technology progresses. I think we're still at the very bottom of that, at the very beginning of that S curve growth for Bitcoin. So I don't think we've seen anything yet. I think this is all just very early adopters, very early investors. When you think about how many institutions are investing in Bitcoin and how many big funds outside of the institutions, private individuals are investing in Bitcoin. There's a lot of people not in this market. And you need to get market participants to a much broader audience than Bitcoin is right now, or any other of the cryptos out there, for that to ease up any. All right. So I hope I answered your question there. How will the Federal Reserve deal with this? Well, that's a great question. We don't have an idea. We have no idea how the Federal Reserve is going to react to this. Now, the Federal Reserve, of course, is working on a cryptocurrency framework, and I think it's a good thing that they are working on this framework. And I think once it comes out, I believe there's supposed to be an early report out this year from the Federal Reserve on a Bitcoin framework or cryptocurrency framework, and what they believe Congress should do or should not do in this framework. I think it's will be a really good thing for the overall market, because there's a lot of people who are not investing in cryptocurrency, especially Bitcoin, because they find it as the Wild West. There's too much volatility, and that really needs to level out, and there needs to be some sort of security that investors have with Bitcoin before the broader market is going to even start to invest in Bitcoin. Will this make BC speculators find it easier to purchase property in Arizona? Maybe. I don't know how that will all play out. But if the bill does pass in Arizona, then you'll be able to spend Bitcoin to buy real estate. Any transaction in Arizona you would be able to use Bitcoin for that transaction. You're buying gas at a gas station, you'd be able to use Bitcoin for it. If you're buying a snack at McDonald's, you'd be able to use Bitcoin as legal tender for it. So I guess the corporations would have to enable that, but the state would have laws in place for the companies to institute Bitcoin as a currency that they would accept. So it is a big deal, I think, in Arizona if this bill can get passed. Again, it's just been introduced. It still has a long process to go through before it even makes it to a floor vote for Arizona. But I think it's really, really good news for Bitcoin in particular. All right. Any other questions? Feel free to leave them in there, and I'll answer them to the best of my ability. All right. I want to talk about Apple. I dug through the earnings report yesterday. We did talk about the numbers when they came out yesterday on the show, but I do want to dive into it a little bit more. AAPL is the ticker symbol for Apple. Now, this was a really good report, and there was a lot of interesting insight reading over the transcript. I mean, look at Apple, up almost 7%, 6.98% today. That's incredible. Throw in what was in after hours, and yeah, it was up 7% today. That's a pretty big move for Apple. Apple usually doesn't make big moves like that. It's usually a couple percent, if that. So this big move, it did take it up just above its 50-day and 21-day moving averages, which does put Apple back into a positive structure. Now, after I'll call it a rough Q4, Apple bounced back with a very, very nice upside result in Q1. As important as the report's EPS and revenue numbers were, I think Apple's commentary on supply chain constraints was even better music for investors. The headline numbers featured solid beats on EPS and revenue and even breaking revenue records. The big thing, the big improvement from Q4's inline EPS result was the fact that they were able to bring in record revenue with supply chain constraints holding them back. iPhones, Macs, wearables, those sales all exceeded analyst expectations. iPad results, however, fell short. Demand remains robust for Apple products, but that product faced the most severe component shortages, the iPad. Services revenue was basically in line, maybe a slight miss, just a slight one. iPhone sales were boosted by the launch of the iPhone 13. Revenue climbed 9% year over year to an all-time record of $71.6 billion despite or in the face of supply chain constraints. Now, Mac revenue was the biggest growth category, up 25% year over year to 10.9 billion. Also, an all-time record despite supply chain constraints. Apple is seeing strong demand for its newly redesigned MacBook Pro. It is worth noting that Apple is now 1 year into its transition to Apple Silicon. And already the vast majority of Mac sales are from the M1 powered devices. Now, iPad was the main trouble area. Its sales actually fell 14% year over year to 7.25 billion due to significant supply chain issues. The good news here, though, is that iPad is by far Apple's smallest category at about 6% of total sales. iPhone, meanwhile, for comparison, accounts for nearly 60% of sales. The supply chain constraints have been long forecasted by Apple, so their impact does not come as a big surprise. Apple warned about component shortages on its earnings call in late July, expecting the supply chain issues to primarily impact iPhone and iPad. Well, that ended up coming true with the iPads. Then, during its Q4 call in October, Apple said that constraints would cause a larger hit to Q1 revenue than the $6 billion experienced in Q4. Now, during the Q&A, Apple conceded that didn't happen. The good news is that Apple now expects fewer supply chain constraints in Q2 than it had in Q1. That means by March, it should start easing up. Supply chain, that is. Bottom line on Apple, this Q1 report was a very welcome after the rough Q4. Demand showed that it remains robust across the broad board of Apple products. And iPhone 13 sales, they were very strong. Remember the reports earlier over the holiday that iPhone sales were slowing down? Well, that didn't turn out to be the case. A key takeaway here is that even a tech behemoth like Apple is not immune from the global component shortage. The timing of the shortage was unfortunate, as it hit just as Apple introduced its iPhone 13 lineup, as well as the Apple Watch Series 7, new iPad, and iPad mini, all of which represent significant advances. However, investors should take comfort in the prospect that supply chain issues should ease up in Q2, at least for Apple. Now, I had been a little concerned heading into this report after Intel, ticker symbol INTC, pushed back its timeline for supply constraint improvement earlier this week. Intel now expects ecosystem constraints to persist all the way through 2022 and into 2023 versus its prior guidance for gradual improvement heading into 2022. So I take Apple's outlook as a big win. It's also good news for Apple suppliers like Skyworks Solutions, ticker symbol SWKS, Corvo, QRVO, Sirius Logic, CRUS, Broadcom, AVGO, Taiwan Semi, TSM, Qualcomm, QCOM, and then, of course, the Van Erik Semiconductor ETF, SMH, all of which ended the day in the green. And many of those names will report over the coming weeks. So it looks good for Apple and Apple suppliers moving forward. Now, I know some see this as maybe a I don't know the right way to describe it, but if the supply issues from other companies reporting right now have been not so good in this quarter, and on their conference calls, they're saying that supply chain issues are just as bad right now, maybe even worse in some cases. That's not like the CPI data, which is looking a month in the past. That's CEOs on the calls today saying that supply chain's a problem right now. So, Apple saying that they should be easing, is it just because of Apple's size and Apple can procure their supplies in an easier fashion? I don't know. It's a big company. Wouldn't that maybe say that it might be harder for Apple? Well, it's something to think about because there's a little bit of mixed reporting there from different CEOs at different companies talking about supply chain. Okay, so uh, I found that interesting in the report. Question: could you put those in the links? What exactly in the links? Um, the company names that I mentioned. I could definitely do that if that's what you're talking about. All right. While you get that question ready, I'll wait just a moment before I move off of Apple and onto Caterpillar, because there were some interesting developments at Caterpillar during their earnings as well. So I do want to talk about that, but I want to give you just a minute if you want to clarify that question. If you want those company names, I can put those in the live chat right now for you, or that ETF, whatever it is that what you wanted the links for. All right. Yep. Okay. I'll do that right now. All right. So I'm going to start putting those links in here for you. So the first one was Skyworks. That ticker symbol is SWKS. The next one is QRVO. All right, got that one. Then we got CRUS, AVGO. All right, and then Taiwan Semi, TSM, and Qualcomm, QCOM, and then the ETF is the last one, and that is SMH. All right, all those tickers should be in the live stream now. There we go. There they are. All right, those are the companies that either they supply Apple products, especially the semiconductor ones, and the semiconductor ETF. That's the last ticker symbol, SMH. Those companies should have some good things to say, good things to report based off of Apple reporting these record-breaking revenue numbers for Apple there. So, okay. All right, going to Caterpillar. So CAT, you're welcome. You are absolutely welcome. All right, Caterpillar, ticker symbol CAT. Now, look at this move here, down 5% for Caterpillar today. Now, Caterpillar, oh, watch out for those spam links in the comments. I can't take them out while I'm live for some reason. I need to figure out how to do that. But just ignore that last comment. That's spam. Okay, here's Caterpillar. Let's look at this chart here right quick, and then we'll talk about it. So there were some good things in the report for Caterpillar. They have a lot of machinery that they produce. They were down 5.1% today. Big drop, a big gap down here below their 50-day moving average. And they're also under their 200-day moving average. But Caterpillar, it generated a solid double-digit sales growth in each of its core segments in Q4 21. That's pretty impressive from Caterpillar. Now, this was leading to a comfortable beat on the top and bottom lines. Now, the company's strong results, they fortify the notion that construction activity around the world remains quite healthy, providing a bullish data point for the global economy, in my opinion. In addition to robust demand for heavy construction equipment, favorable dealer inventory levels and price hikes help to drive revenue higher by, get this, 23%. That's just incredible for Caterpillar. Over the past few quarters, revenue growth hasn't been able to be anything like that at Caterpillar. After the construction industries segment, it was about 40% of Q4 revenue. Registered growth of 30% in Q3 21. The division followed up that impressive performance with growth of 27% this quarter. Ongoing strength in North America residential construction, that market is the key catalyst for this business, bolstered by rising commodity and raw material prices. The mining heavy resource industry segment that posted sales growth of 32% in Q3 and 27% in Q4. Rounding it out, energy and transportation, it was the lagger, but I would say that in maybe air quotes because that revenue was up 19% to $5.7 billion. However, plenty of companies they would be envious of high teen growth rate, right? Just like that. I'm sure any company would love 19%. Now, Cat experienced, or maybe they expect, that this booming demand environment to continue. They don't see it slowing down. They are forecasting Q1 22 sales that exceed year ago levels. Unfortunately for Cat, though, the story does not end there, as it has other issues to contend with. And I'm going to go over those issues now. And this is what brought the stock down 5%. Margins continue to be squeezed by a combination of, I'm sure you can guess it, higher freight cost, rising material cost, and production inefficiencies related to supply chain constraints. Those headwinds caused operating margin to contract by 600 basis points year over year to now 11.7%. Even more problematic is that Cat expects those cost pressures to persist into Q1. That's just not going to cut it for investors, causing adjusted operating profit margin to decline on a quarter over quarter basis. On the positive side, because there's always a silver lining if you look for it, additional pricing actions should offset manufacturing cost increases in fiscal year 22, leading to maybe stronger margins later in the year. China is still a sluggish market with the whole Evergrande problem, and it's escalating risks and volatility in the real estate market. That is not good for Cat, especially on the commercial side. They pose a real threat to Cat's construction business. Rising interest rates and tighter monetary policy could also slow down capital investments into large scale projects. It's not as cheap once rates go up to invest in those bigger projects, dampening demand for heavy machinery. The main takeaway is that it's a mixed picture for Cat, as its shrinking margin cloud really does put a blemish on that very healthy demand environment. Although the company believes that supply chain issues will ease after Q1 22. Now, that's interesting because that's what Apple CEO Tim Cook said. So now we've got two companies just reporting, one yesterday, one today, about supply chain easing in March. But investors at CAT didn't really seem to be sold on that optimistic projection. So that's it for CAT. Not a whole lot there. They do have strong demand. They do have prices going up, input costs going up, inflationary pricing, and that's causing margins to be squeezed. But what I find interesting is the supply chain comments. Apple and CAT are both looking towards March for the supply chain problems to start easing. If that's the case, that's going to help the stock market a lot. Finally, supply can meet demand if that occurs. All right, that's what I wanted to cover in today's live stream. Apple, Caterpillar, talked about Bitcoin, market overview. And just remember, Sunday evening, I have my Catalyst Watch video. It comes out every Sunday evening. I do a live stream. Usually it's later in the evening when we do it. And I don't just talk about stocks that might go up in the coming week, but also stocks to watch out for that might go down in the coming week. So make sure you're subscribed so you catch that. Also, do me a huge favor. Smash the like button. Take the URL from this video and share it wherever you can. That's our marketing budget. You doing those two things. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for the questions today. I know it was a quick one, quick live stream, quick show today. It's Friday, and we usually don't get too many views on our Friday video, so I do kind of make them a little shorter than normal. Otherwise, we're typically here for an hour, hour and a half, maybe 2 hours at some point. So thank you very much for joining me today. And if you are watching the replay of this, make sure to leave ticker symbol and question in the comments, and we'll go over it live during Monday's show. So I hope to see you Monday afternoon after the market closes around 5 p.m., 5:30. We go live, talk about the market, stocks, crypto, most importantly, answer your questions. So that's the biggest one. All right. Thank you guys so very much for joining me today. Have a wonderful weekend, and I will see you in the next video.